We hit record.
Yesterday's meeting, and
Yes.
this notice is in accordance with Utah Code sections 52-4-207, 4 and 5, the Open and Public Meetings Act requirement to put in writing a determination to hold a public meeting without an anchor location. The anchor location for the Drinking Water Board meetings, multi-agency state office building at 195 North, 1950 West, is within the boundaries of Salt Lake City. At this time of COVID-19 pandemic response, Salt Lake City remains at an orange level of restricted activity, which restricts gatherings of 20 or more. As chair of the Drinking Water Board, I, Roger Friedel, have deemed it necessary to hold the September 1st meeting, 2020 meeting of the board electronically and without an anchor location, as an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination expires on September 25th, 2020. Drinking Water Board is now called to order. Roll call. Marie?
All right. Roger Friedel.
Here.
Christy Bell.
Here.
Scott Morrison.
Here.
Jeff Combs.
I think I'm here.
We
Okay,
can
just
hear you.
confirm it.
Dave Pitcher.
Here, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Eric Franson.
Here.
Barbara Gardner.
Here.
Blake Tullis.
Here.
And Scott Baird.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Let us proceed. Approval of the minutes, June 9th, 2020. Questions on the June 9th meeting?
This is Dave Pitcher. I'll move to approve.
Motion made by Dave,
This is
Second.
Christy Bell. I'll second it.
seconded by Janelle. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the July 20th, 2020 meeting. Any questions on those minutes? Hearing none, we need a motion.
This is Scott. I can make a motion to approve the July 20th meeting minutes.
Motion made by Scott,
It's Jeff. I'll
This is
second.
Christy. I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Any
Roger,
further-
you have to pick who that second was. We got two of them.
Who was the second?
Jeff.
Yeah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Disclosure of intent to publicly comment. Any public here that would like to comment at the public comment time? Oh, okay. Disclosure of conflict of interest. I have a conflict of interest on 6DB, the Bear River Water Conservancy District. Just so you're aware. Can I conduct that, or if I need to, but I just can't comment, correct?
You probably should pass that to Christy at this point to have that discussion and determine what the board wants to do with your declared conflict of interest.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on whether he can comment and vote?
I'd recommend that Roger be able to comment, but refrain from voting.
I would agree with that. Anybody else?
I'd agree.
Okay, when we get
Sounds
to
good.
that, we will allow you to comment, but then sustain from voting.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other conflicts of interest? All right. Financial Assistance Committee report. Michael Grange.
There we go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Get to the right page in the agenda. There we go. All right, starting with the, excuse me, the state program. Currently, we have $4.5 million in the fund. Over the course of the coming 12 months, we're looking at another $4.5 roughly million coming in. By August 1st of 2021, we're looking at $8.9 million in the state program for project funding. The projects we're currently working with, we're still working with Aurora City, Kane County, Virgin Town, and Genola to move forward with their authorized projects. The oldest one of that bunch is Aurora, which was authorized in August of 2018. We will follow up as staff with them and figure out where they're at and if they wish to proceed with their project. Typically, once they've gone out a couple of years, which this one now is, we defund or recommend that they defund, deauthorize that project and come back with a different or an updated project, since those bids are now 2 years old and are likely not very valid anymore. So we'll be working with Aurora City to get that taken care of. Others that are in process, a bunch of planning grants out there, and fewer smaller projects for the board to look at if they have any questions. We have 3 state projects, 3 state program projects, excuse me, coming before the board today. Any questions on the state program? Hearing none, we'll move to the federal program. Currently, we have just over $17 million in the fund. Over the course of the coming year, we're looking at another 21 million coming in to give us 38 million by August 1st of 2021 for federal program projects. We're currently working with Canyon Meadows, Hyde Park, and Sigurdtown to get their loans underway, get the loans closed. Actually, Canyon Meadows is now closed, excuse me. They are ready to start construction on the Canyon Meadows project. We'll be working with Forest Glen to close their loan out. Their loan's been out there for about 6 years now. They have about $50,000 left in their escrow account, but no projects planned to use that money. So we'll be working with them to bring that money back into the fund to provide to another city that does have a project available. We have a couple of projects today. Actually, only one. I'll let Sky take care of that when it's her turn, but we have a couple of federal program projects that are on the agenda today. Are there any questions on the federal program? Okay. Moving on then to the project priority list. We're adding 2 new projects to the list. Wilson Arch West. 5 Points. And their project is a new pump and motor upgrades and replacement. Provo City is also being added to the priority list with 12.9 points. Their project is an aquifer storage and recovery project that includes pump stations and wells to inject water into their aquifer for future use. The Financial Assistance Committee has recommended that the Drinking Water Board approve the updated project priority list.
This is Jeff. I'd recommend that the board authorize adding these 2 projects to the project priority list.
This is Christy. I'll second it.
Motion and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. All right, whoops. Scrolled a little too quickly through that one. My apologies.
Michael, will you make sure you introduce
Yes, I
McCarthy
was
on this
just
item?
going to do that. Thank you, Marie. So this next item on the agenda was requested by the board during our emergency meeting, and then again during the board meeting where the debt relief policy was discussed and voted upon by the board. The board asked for legal opinion on what constitutes an emergency and who has the authority to declare an emergency. We reached out to our Attorney General's office, and Mr. Paul McConkey was the attorney that was assigned to this project. He is here on the meeting today and is available to ask or to answer questions that the board may have. So we have his opinion. It was part of the board packet. We can definitely read that opinion if need be, or if you've already reviewed that opinion, we can just move forward with any questions that you may have for Mr. McConkey or for myself. What is the board's preference?
Do we have any comments or questions?
Okay. Oh, Mr. McConkey, any comments on your end?
Yes.
Or I'm sorry, did I interrupt someone?
This is just Marie. I was going to say, let's make sure we have a bit of a discussion so the board fully understands what that decision is.
Correct.
Okay, should I just go ahead and start?
Yes,
Yes.
you can go ahead and start. Thank you.
I tell you what I've done. I have, our office was asked to prepare an opinion on this proposed policy. And so I have done that. I've had an opportunity to review both the federal law, the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, along with the CFR rules. I've also reviewed the state law. I've looked at the authorities of both the state and local government to declare a state of emergency, and am satisfied that both the governor and the local authorities have that authority to declare emergencies under Utah Code Section 53, Part 2A. I've also looked at the policy and looked at it in light of the both the federal and the state law, and satisfied that it does comply with the law, that the state has the ability and is giving latitude and is given the latitude to adopt this policy, provide debt relief during declared states of emergency. I did want to point one thing out that I noticed as I was reviewing this memorandum, and that is with regard to under subpart 2, the loan parameters were actually amended in 2018 under America's Water Infrastructure Act. And so I think there's just for the record, I want to make a correction in what was stated in the memorandum. And that is under CFR 40 CFR 35.3525A. And this is the loan parameters. There was a change, and I'll just read that and read those changes so it's clear for the record. It says this assistance may be done by subpart 1 adjusting interest rate loans down to 0, provided the recipient beginning annual repayment of principal and interest no later than it was 1 year, and that was changed to 18 months after project completion. And then under subpart 2, loan repayment is completed no later than it was 20 years after project completion, and that has been changed to 30 years after project completion, and then 40 years for a disadvantaged community. So I just wanted to make that correction for the record in the memo. I don't know if there's any questions regarding that, but those amendments were made under the 2018 America's Water Infrastructure Act. I don't know if there are any questions. I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Do we have any board?
So those 3 items are the options that are available, right? There's no debt forgiveness option. It's just changing the conditions of the loan repayment schedule and so on, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Paul, I know that at the last board meeting, the board had some questions about who could designate an emergency that would allow this policy to be triggered. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Well, the way the policy is stated, during a declared state of emergency and for 100 days following, the Drinking Water Board will accept requests from loan recipients to restructure their loans based on financial hardship. And it appears that the way that the policy is worded, that would be a state of emergency that's declared either by the governor or by local authorities. So that would be something that maybe the policy should state that it would be a declared state of emergency either by the governor or by local authorities. I think there were some notes in the minutes that reflected that there was maybe some consideration of making that change.
As it reads now, though, it would be applicable to any official stated state of emergency, which would be both.
Yes, that's the way that I would read that. During any declared state of emergency.
You know, this is Eric Franson, as I've thought more about this and read through the information, even if a state of emergency is declared by anyone with that authority, it doesn't necessarily trigger any decisions. All situations will be looked at and evaluated independently of who and what the state of emergency is, if I'm understanding things correctly. So, you know, in the end, declaring the state of emergency is a trigger, but the work of assessing, understanding, and potentially adjusting is left up to the staff working on those individual situations. So I don't know that we're going to necessarily change who can and can't declare. So, I mean, it is what it is, in my opinion. And it was good to see that information, understand who can and can't. And then so if I'm say this again, as it currently stands, it really doesn't matter who declares it. Once it's declared by either the governor or a local authority, then this particular situation can be triggered. Okay, I'm okay with that.
And I think the key, I guess the key point in my memo is that, and I think that's correct, all that does is just give the ability for somebody to apply for relief. And then the board or the board's designee will make that decision. But the burden is really on the person who's on the applicant to show that they're in financial hardship to qualify for receiving that relief. And then as the board considers the application, then they will basically apply the law and apply the factors that go into making that determination whether relief is justified. And that's already spelled out in the law. So really all this does is just trigger the ability to submit an application for consideration.
This is Scott Morrison. Paul, thank you very much for the memorandum. I don't have any further questions.
Any further discussion from the board? Questions?
This is Dave Pitcher. I appreciate that clarification on the conditions of years. That's one of the questions I had, but you answered that. In our prior meeting, we postponed approving the policy. Was there action today to approve the policy?
The approval, it was approved temporarily until we could get legal opinion, just in case there were those water systems that may want to apply for debt relief due to the COVID pandemic. And the intent of the board, I believe at that point, was to revisit this policy at this meeting and then take further action, yes.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
My understanding, it would be to approve it as was presented in our June board meeting. I'll make that motion that we approve the debt relief policy that was presented.
This is Eric, and I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Do you have anything else on this, Michael?
Just that as we move forward, as I understand it, the governor has issued another executive order extending the pandemic response. The legislature failed to uphold that, so every 30 days, as the governor sees fit, he will review this and perhaps extend it, perhaps not. The policy states 180 days at the end of the policy, or at the end of the, excuse me, at the end of the declared emergency. The board no longer needs to or is required to accept applications for financial relief. We're still not sure when water systems may apply for this debt relief. I'd just like to get some feel from the board if they would be willing to entertain debt relief requests that may extend beyond that 180 days after the declared emergency ends? And if so, do we need to change the policy to a different time frame that still gives the board the, as the language says, the board has the option to shorten the time frame from the 180 days as the policy states? Would the board be amenable to maybe extending simply because of the uncertainty that our water systems are facing from revenue shortfalls that may be related to the pandemic?
Michael, are you maybe suggesting that a water system may not realize that they have a budget shortfall until they've closed out their books? So it may be more of a fiscal year related type of thing.
It may be
more than 6 months.
It may be, and in our communication with water systems earlier in this year, when this all first started happening, most of the water systems believed that they would be okay for 2020. It was 2021 that they were showing some concern or expressing concern with, that if the pandemic and the shutdowns and all of the ramifications of the pandemic continued for an extended period in 2020 and into 2021, they may not realize a shortfall until, like you say, Marie, maybe the end of the year, or after things have moved forward some more. So yeah, I just like to get the feel for the board's intent. If the board would be willing to, in addition to having the authority to shorten the time frame, perhaps to increase the frame to some reasonable point, and I'm not sure what that reasonable point is. I would hope that our water systems would know sooner rather than later that they're going to be experiencing some debt or some revenue shortfalls, and would take appropriate actions. But I'm just concerned that some may not.
This is Eric. I guess as I think about it, 6 months roughly should be sufficient to, I guess I'm hopeful that should be sufficient too, to take care of any issues. And emergency situation would imply some immediate need, some emergency help or emergency adjustment. In reality, these systems are going to have to restructure their own debt, not just on the water system, but maybe on other pieces to their financial situation, which may include raising rates or modifying rates or things like that. And I would hope that 6 months' time would be enough to make those adjustments and not have to come to the Division of Drinking Water to do that. And we're talking 6 months from the end of the emergency, not from the beginning.
Yes, correct.
So, I mean, I'm not opposed to giving some leeway to extending the time, but I guess for the most part, feel comfortable with that 180 days right now, I guess is where I'm at.
180 days from when was it? At the end of the emergency?
Yes, from the end of the emergency, the declared
That's what
state.
the governor says it's no longer an emergency, or how's that?
Yeah, if the governor or whoever has declared the emergency does not renew the emergency declaration, that is considered the end, or whenever they state that the end of the declaration it will happen. So if Governor Herbert fails to renew the emergency declaration, that will be the end of the of the state of emergency. And the 180 days will start at that point.
So Michael, Blake Tullis, so I guess I have a question. The way it's currently written, it says 180 days and that the board reserves the right to extend or shorten this time frame based on extenuating circumstances. So it seems like it's covering what you explained already. So are we thinking of doing something differently than what it says?
No, I failed to read through that and forgot that we had put the word extend or shorten in that phrasing.
Okay. And so, yeah, I like Eric,
It's
I
already
agree.
covered.
I like having 180 days because that'll catch people's attention. We need to be on this. And then we can, consider different things as circumstances warrant. But it's nice to have a solid deadline that people can reference anyway.
Okay.
I agree with both Blake and Eric.
I do too.
All right. Thank you. We'll move forward with it as is. Appreciate that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome.
You're welcome
Thank
to
you.
stick around as long as you like.
Okay, thank you.
SRF applications, Axtell Community Service Distribution, Sky Cyber.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to present the first project for state funding on the agenda. This first application comes from Axtell Community Special Service District. They are requesting funding to assist with specifically planning and permitting and develop a source. The secondary sources would meet division requirements for communities that have more than 100 connections. They don't currently have a secondary water source. The district intends to pursue construction funding through USDA Rural Development, and that's to help them develop the Springham pipeline. But before that can happen, USDA Rural Development does require some planning and permitting prior to that authorization. So the deliverables for this planning project would be a preliminary engineering report, environmental clearances, and then based on the location of the proposed secondary source, there would be some easements required both across Bureau of Land Management lands and then Utah Division of Water Resources. So the total amount of funding for this planning effort is $133,000. The district is requesting $103,000 from the Drinking Water Board. They did receive a $30,000 grant from USDA Rural Development. The local MAGI for Axtell is $47,200, which is 98% of the state MAGI. And their current average water bill is $56.13 per month. And that's 1.43% of their local MAGI. We did project what their after water project would be with a full loan, and that would increase to $60.80, which is 1.55% of their local MAGI. So we looked at 4 options, and after this was presented to the Financial Assistance Committee, they recommend that the Drinking Water Board authorize a loan of $103,000 at 2% interest for 20 years to the Axtell Community Special Service District. We do have some representatives from both the district and their consulting engineer online. So if you guys are online, you should be able to unmute yourselves and you can introduce yourselves to the board. And then we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, I'm here, Travis Blackburn, the chair of the district here in Axtell. Also, I have a board member here, Jay, and also our engineer is here, our engineers.
So any questions from the board?
We just, it's kind of difficult down here just exploring for additional source. We have found the source, and it's just kind of complicated as far as getting through these public lands. So basically, this will really help us out in the community because we only rely upon that one source, especially where we're in this drought now it's really kind of crunch time.
Board,
And the
do we
new
have-
source, I was going to say the new source being contemplated is the spring, and even in this dry year, it's continuing to produce well.
Our existing source?
No, the new source that's being contemplated, did I read that correctly, that it's a spring?
Yes, correct.
And it's producing well this summer?
Yes.
And I think that the spring is currently undeveloped, and so it's producing. There's some investigation that needs to happen along the way to kind of identify or try and estimate what it will produce if it's developed.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Any further questions?
One question I'd have is, this is a proposed loan for basically a study. Have you looked at what the effect of building the pipeline and adding it into the rate structure would have? And if so, what would that be?
Yes, we have.
The cost estimates, if everything gets permitted and all the clearances are received, the cost estimates between $2 and $2.5 million. So there's a significant financial burden upcoming still. So we recognize the position of the district with their MAGI and rates right now. We also are looking forward, and we've gone through cost scenarios with them about different options through rural development, CIB, drinking water, different options on how that might look. It obviously will have a significant impact on their rates going forward after we start into the actual project as well.
So I have a question. In the description, it says that the Willow Creek Irrigation Company owns the water rights to that water and that they are supportive. Is there an illegal agreement or something in place that as the study moves forward that water will be available to the city?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've met with Willow Creek Irrigation because we share one source now. We have one water, so we've met with the board of Willow Creek and they approved us to explore the spring area because we own stock in the Willow Creek Irrigation Company. And then when people come into town, they have that water stock and then they turn it over to the district. So we have been working with Willow Creek and they're on board, and so that's kind of the scoop of that.
There have been discussions as well that going forward there will likely need to be an actual legal agreement between the two. To this point, the Willow Creek Irrigation Company board has approved in their meeting, in their minutes, to move forward with it with that intention.
Okay, thank you.
Do you anticipate any issues with DWR or BLM bringing the pipeline across the property?
I don't think we anticipate issues. We've met with both entities to kind of define and identify what their requirement will be. Obviously, each one of them have their own process. Division of Wildlife is that will be actually the more stringent process to go through the NEPA and the easements on that. So far, they're optimistic. There is a step-by-step process though that has to happen before they can. They can't guarantee that it's going to happen. They have to go through that process and make sure that it'll work out.
Great.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to ask, as I pull up your IPS record, it shows that you have failed to submit the Consumer Confidence Report from back in 2015 and have yet to submit the 2020 report. Those have to be two separate reports, and even though you've done the 16, 17, 18, and 19 CCR report, having failed to do the 2015 report is going to force us to take action on your water system because EPA escalates and adds additional points onto your system for those old missing reports. So what is your status on getting both of those reports completed and into the division?
Yes, in our last board meeting, we addressed that issue. We were unaware that the 2015 was not complete, and we've got our secretary and everything working on that. That was a couple of days ago, and so somehow I don't know how that got missed that many years ago. So we're working on getting that completed.
I might the 2020 report. The 2019 report isn't in either, so it still shows that there's a violation for that just recently came on your record in July of 2020 for that same thing. Have you submitted your consumer confidence report to your community in July?
Yes, I thought that was all taken care of.
Could I just make sure that documentation gets into us.
I don't mean to butt in here, but could I just interject something here?
Curtis, yes.
I was at the meeting at Axtel's meeting last week when we talked about this, and I've been in touch with Emily at our office, and she has taken care of the 2015 CCR. And it's been submitted. I think it just hasn't caught up to you yet, Marie. But for what I'm sure that was done just at the end of last week. And we're also taking care of that 2019 CCR also.
Thank you.
Our records still show that it's not there, so we'll need to follow up with that. That's not a rural water responsibility. That's a water system responsibility.
We'll follow up on that.
If you would please follow up with it and make sure that the document is there.
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Maybe this might not be in order, but they've got a big project coming up to pay for down the road, and it seems to be a very good project. And it's hard for me to see that they're paying interest on a design to just get a project, and they're going to have to be paying quite a bit for the project. Would it be in order to consider 0% 20-year loan on $103,000 considered as part of the financial committee?
This is Eric Franson. I think the intent is as each step of the process is evaluated, you have an opportunity to look at the big picture. And with this being the first piece to the puzzle and a loan, when they do come back, the entire picture can be a little clearer as opposed to trying to project something into the future. So let's take care of this request now. And then when and if they do come back, they might not even come back to Division of Drinking Water. It might be a different entity than the entire parameters of the project and the cost and the scope will be known. So that's kind of what we discussed in the Financial Assistance Committee meeting.
This is Jeff. If you look at the projected water bill, the difference between 0% interest and 2% is about $1. And the match is only 0.03% difference. I don't think that that's significant enough to warrant a 0%.
I appreciate the discussion.
Any further discussion?
This is Eric. I'll make a motion if that's okay. I'll move that the Drinking Water Board authorize a loan of $103,000 at 2% interest for 20 years to Axtell Community Special Service District.
This is Jeff. I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I probably should add contingent upon resolution of outstanding IPS issues. I'd like to amend my motion to include that.
Second, are you good with that?
Yes, I'm good with those amendments, that amendment.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christie, it's your turn.
All right, I'll try not to go crazy with power. So looks like we have Bear River Water Conservancy District on next, and Heather is presenting.
Thank you. So Bear River Water Conservancy District has a project consisting of 2 test wells for the Harper Ward project. They're going to use this information from these test wells to drill larger production wells in the future, as the Harper Ward system does not have their own source at this time. The cost of the project is estimated at $402,010, with Bear River contributing 50% of that cost towards the project. So the request from the board is $201,005. The local MAGI for Bear River is approximately 98% of the state MAGI. The after project water bill would be $71.39, which is 1.9% of their local MAGI. So that would put it over the recommended 1.75% to receive additional subsidy. So we ran a couple of options, and the Financial Assistance Committee recommendation was the 70-30 split, which is a loan of $141,000 and a grant of $60,005 to Bear River Water Conservancy District at 0% for 20 years. And we have Carl Mathley on the call. If you have any questions on the project.
I had
Okay,
one quick
board.
question. Was the financial assistance based off of the Harper Ward area or the Bear River Water Conservancy District as a whole?
It was based off the Harper Ward area.
Any other questions or discussion? Not hearing any. Anybody have a motion?
This is Dave. I'll move that the Drinking Water Board authorize a loan for $141,000 and a grant of $60,005 to Bear River Water Conservancy District at 0% for 20 years.
Okay,
This is
motion
Scott. I
and a
can
second.
second it.
Motion by Scott. Thank you. Any further discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Don't hear any. I think it passed. Congratulations.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christie.
From
Heather Pate at the Caneville Special Service District.
Okay, yes. So Caneville Special Service District has a project consisting of a treatment facility, fire hydrants, and tank upgrades. The cost of the project is estimated at $600,000, and they will be contributing $5,000 towards the project. There was no information for Caneville on their MAGI because they're not part of a town or a municipality. So staff considered 2 different methods to determine if they qualify for additional subsidy. First, we used the MAGI for the neighboring town of Hanksville, which closely approximates Caneville's economic conditions. Hanksville's MAGI is 45% of the state MAGI, and at full loan, the estimated after project water bill would be $156.15, which is 8.6% of the local MAGI. The second consideration was using the MAGI for the zip code, which was $34,800 or 72.5% of the state MAGI. And under this scenario, the project water bill at full loan would be 5.39% of their local MAGI. In either case, Caneville does qualify as a hardship community and is eligible to receive additional subsidy. So when we did the evaluation, I based that off of the Hanksville MAGI. The financial assistance recommendation was the 50-50 split. The drinking loan of $295,000 at 0% for 30 years, and a grant of $300,000 to Caneville Special Service District. And conditions include they resolve any deficiencies on their IPS report and implement a rate structure for the water system. And we have John Jackson on the line, who's the general manager for Caneville. And I believe Kelly Chappell, who their engineer, is also on the line if there are any questions on the project.
I have one question. This is Dave. What's the source that's being treated and what type of treatment plant is it?
So, Mr. Jackson, we can't hear you. I believe you are muted, or Colt, is he muted on your end?
How about that?
Good.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Technologies, you know. Yeah, your question is a good one because it kind of answers we have one item on our IPS report of a check valve in the well. The well is located 4 miles west of Canesville out in the Red Desert. And it's an artesian well, and it maintains 20 pounds of pressure at the wellhead. And of course, then there's 4 miles of pipe. And the treatment needed it's high in iron and manganese. And so that is our treatment plant. There's no bacteria from the well water, and it's pretty well protected. So our treatment plant is iron and manganese, is basically what it is. And we use chlorine gas to oxidize the and so forth in the treatment center. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I would like to comment a little bit on the board. I appreciate the board. You can't imagine how much we appreciate the board. Back 30 years ago, we had no water system whatsoever. It was like, you know, hauling water out of the river to shower and hauling water from town to drink. And so it was a destitute situation. But through the graces of the water resources and other funding, we were able to accomplish this and pay back the loan that we had incurred that even in that. And that whole system was like $250,000. And now we feel like in analyzing the system with the engineer, and this is another thing we thank you so much for, is funding the engineer's report to study these things. We felt like that we could handle most situations that happen in the system except right at the treatment plant itself. There's certain things that are outdated there. We shop online for used parts for the control panel to keep going, and a lot of the old steel plumbing is questionable. If that quits, we're literally out of water until it's changed. And so we felt like that was the most critical part right there that we should address first. If we have a broken water line, we can fix that. We can have done. We can take care of those things. But the treatment plant itself is extremely outdated. Like I said, I call it's a Filtronics plant. I called them for parts and they don't deal with them anymore. We recently had a storm take out some timers that I was lucky to find used ones on eBay and got the system back online before we run out of water. And so that's a situation. We felt like that's the most critical. And so we really are appreciative of you folks and what you do to help people and that you're there for us. We are a very small community. Our total head count living on the water is like 24. And that's people that live on the water continually. We have some hookups that people that don't live there that visit 2 or 3 times a year or something. But those are the ones that live there, like 24. So our hardship is really taxed, and our rate structure has been really low, trying to help people through, and of course that's been detrimental in the long run, I suppose. But now we've talked to them, and they're willing to. They realize that, you know, if we don't take care of this situation, there'll come a time when there will be no water until it is taken care of, and we're looking at like going through a year's process to even get funding now to address it. What would it be like if you were totally out of water, you know, and I have to wait for that? So that's kind of where we're at. Does anybody have any other questions for me? I'd like to tell Heather I appreciate her, and Kelly Chappell, our engineer. He's been really good to work with us. Appreciate him. And
On this?
Pardon?
John, this is Jeff Combs on the board. I have one question. So are your water users, are they okay with their water bill going up a bit? Are they aware of that? What's their response to that?
They're all aware of it. We've contacted them all, and we've asked for input back. Of course, nobody wants their water bill raised. Anybody that's been involved in water knows that, even if it's $2 or $3. But most of the people live there on the board, so they recognize that it is a destitute situation. It has to happen. If the board could see a little better deal on the grant, it would help with the water rates maybe. But we're willing to do what we got to do. We've been with drinking water since the beginning and maintained a certified operator and complied as best we could. Well, we complied fully to what was asked of us. And I have the one issue on the IPS report, which is a check valve in the well, but it wasn't designed in there because the well is artesian. It can't shut it off. You can shut it off, but you can't back siphon in any way. And so there's kind of a question there. But if the board really would like it addressed in this construction, we could put one in. I don't see the point, but we could do that if the board would like.
Okay, thank you, John.
That check valve is listed as a minor deficiency. So the division recognizes that there's no public health risk associated with that.
Yeah, any deficiencies we've had, we've taken them really serious and immediately taken care of them over the years.
Yes, your record indicates that. Thank you.
Somebody in the mood to make a motion?
Yeah, this is Jeff. I'll make a motion. I recommend that the Drinking Water Board authorize a loan of $295,000, 0% interest for 30 years, and a grant of $300,000 to the Kingville Special Service District. Condition include that they resolve any differences on their IPS report and implement a rate structure for the water system.
Motion made by Jeff.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Heather.
Provo City. Sky.
All right, the first of our two federal projects is Provo City. Provo City reached out to me late last week, the Public Works Director, Shane Jones, and he respectfully requested that this item be rescheduled for the November 3rd drinking board meeting. The reason being is they have pursued some additional funding sources, and the additional time is going to give them a chance to see how those mature and take shape. They've also put in for funding through Board of Water Resources, and they're scheduled to be, I think that project will be presented at their October meeting. So I don't know if there's a motion that the board needs to make to reschedule, but I'm not planning to present the Provo City application today, and there's no Provo City applicants online.
We don't need a motion to reschedule, do we?
No.
I didn't think. Okay.
Okay.
Wilson Arch.
All right. Next application is from Wilson Arch Water and Sewer Company. This application came in after the Financial Assistance Committee met in July. So this is a staff recommendation. It hasn't gone through the Financial Assistance Committee yet, and it's a bit of an emergency situation. So Wilson Arch Water and Sewer Company is in San Juan County. They are requesting funding to upgrade distribution pumps, motors, and controller for the west side system. On a recent technical inspection and visit, it was discovered that one of their pumps is on the verge of failure, and so they're concerned if it's not replaced soon that it could fail and then contaminate the system. This is federal funding, so the project scored 43.5 points on the project priority list. The total amount of funding needed is $58,800. The water company is going to be contributing $800 of in-kind labor towards the project. So the remaining amount, $58,000, is what they're requesting from the board today. Their local MAGI for Wilson Arch Community, and that's based on the zip code area, is $35,700, and that's 74% of the state MHEI. The system currently provides water to 18 connections, and the current average water bill is $83.22 per connection. So that's roughly 2.8% of their local MAGI. When we projected their after project water bill at a full loan, it would raise the bill to, it's incorrect in the narrative, but in the table it's correct, $96.99, which is 3.26% of their local MAGI. So based on their ratio of local MAGI to state MAGI, as well as their average water bill, they do qualify to be considered for additional subsidy. We looked at 4 different options, a couple at full loan at different interest rates. We also looked at a 70-30 split, 70% loan, 30% principal forgiveness. And then we also looked at a full 100% principal forgiveness option. Given the fact they are a hardship community, they could be, this will be up for the board to discuss. Staff is recommending that the Drinking Water Board authorize $58,000 in principal forgiveness to Wilson Arch Water and Sewer Company. We do have representatives from the water company online with us today, as well as their consulting engineer from Jones and DeMille. So welcome any questions.
Board, we have questions?
So this water system doesn't appear to be a public water system yet. Can we speak to that?
Maria, we would appreciate it if you tried to explain that for us.
Oh, so the population listed in the divisions record, it still shows that it's a sub-public. water system, that there's not enough population for the division to regulate this water system yet. And in the proposal, it showed that it wouldn't have a projected population until the year 2040. And so I'm not even certain if the board is authorized to give funding to a public water system, to a system that's not a public water system. And our records are showing that this is not a public water system.
Do we have Dawn Howe on the line?
Yes, so, I don't know how to address that, Maria, because I thought that we were going to put this back together as part of our public water system. We have two separate systems down here. It was divided by the Division of Drinking Water. And so I thought that we were putting that back together again.
Oh, so the intent is to consolidate with Wilson Arch East and be one consolidated water system.
Correct. Yes.
I would. It would be preferable for that to happen. I guess I would be looking for some sort of protection with the for the board at giving this loan. The concept of getting these issues resolved so that it can be consolidated is accurate, but again, I'm not exactly certain if the board can give the loan to the non-public portion of this system. The loan may actually need to go to the existing public water system and then used towards this. I'm not certain. Maybe Michael would have a feel for that, but granting a loan to this particular I don't know. Wilson Arch Water and Sewer Company may be an authorized recipient, whereas Wilson Arch West Water System is not. I just want to make sure that we're okay in how we proceed with this.
Marie, could we structure the motion that the board can authorize the funds to be made available upon consolidation of those, the east and west systems?
Yes, we can. We've done that in the past.
Is the water and sewer company also running the Wilson Arch East? Does it?
That is correct. We run both sides of the system. We ran into a snag getting this into the hands of the Special Service District. If we could have turned it over to the Special Service District, we would have done that years ago. But we hit a snag and we just can't seem to get beyond that. But as far as the water and sewer company is concerned, this is one system just with two distribution points.
This is Jeff. I have a question. If they're combined, does that affect their Magi and their water bill? And that could affect our determination on principal grant forgiveness and so forth.
So when I applied for this, the numbers that I put in for our population actually included both sides of the highway. If I had just included the west side of the highway, you're talking about 4 homes with 4 individuals living on it.
If we're in good standing with giving the loan to Wilson Arch Water and Sewer Company, who is running both of these facilities, so that the west side community can be consolidated into that and we can move forward. As long as that is legal action by the board. I don't have any concerns with it. I just wanted to have that discussion.
Marie, do you have population numbers for the east side system in front of you?
I can definitely get that. I want to say it's about 30. $34 is what we have on record. So the east side is an approved water system. Very few points on IPS. They have some cross connection control program items in there. They are in good standing, and so the fact that they consider themselves one whole system, it is indicative that they're okay. The Wilson Arch West has several significant deficiencies that are listed, but I'm not so certain how applicable those are once we consolidate the two.
And I would just like to say, we've worked with Scott Hacking on getting all of those deficiencies taken care of. We were down to just getting the engineering report approved, and Scott left us. And so that's kind of where we're at, is still just trying to get that engineering report approved. But at this point, we don't want to submit that knowing that we've got to upgrade these pumps. We want to give you the most accurate information that we can give to you.
Yeah, so the significant deficiencies that we show on record are just that we have not approved any of the facilities on the west side. So that includes a pump facility, 2 storage tanks, and 2 wells. And we would show those all as significant deficiencies until we had approved them. So are all of those facilities included in that engineering report that's been submitted?
Yes, and this whole engineering report was to get approval of everything. And once we got the approval of this side of this highway, that was when we would be able to combine the 2 systems in your system, in the Division Drinking Water System, and make it just one.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. I'm now reacclimated to this system and the situation.
Okay.
Other questions or discussion? Time for motion if anybody feels so inclined.
I'm sorry, I guess I missed your question.
We're looking for a motion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Eric. I'll make a motion that the Drinking Water Board authorize $58,000 in principal forgiveness to Wilson Arch Water and Sewer Company. And now I got to add the stipulations on the end of this motion. Contingent upon. Can I make it contingent upon submittal and approval of the report allowing for merging of the 2 systems?
So Eric, I don't know that we necessarily need that contingent upon on this.
Okay.
The separation of these 2 water systems, now that I've been reminded, was an artificial separation from the division. At one point, there were issues on the west side, issues on the east side, and I believe that the separation of this was an effort for the division to try to help the system move forward, but it wasn't a good step to take. And we just need to consolidate those back together. And even with that, there's a special service district that, so it's not just consolidating the east side with the west side, but it's consolidating those two together and then possibly moving that over to a special service district. Is that accurate, Don?
Yes, I'm sorry, it's delayed. Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to get this into the hands of the special service district.
Okay, so there's no concern with a simple motion from the division.
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's on the division to consolidate those back together again.
Then I will leave my motion as a simple motion with no attachments.
Okay, we have a motion.
This is Scott. Nice job, Eric. I'm happy to second that.
Motion made by, or second by Scott. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate this.
Being that we've been trying to do it for 20 years.
Well, congratulations, Ben.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rural Water Association report, Dale. Your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's good to see some of you and hear others of you. And one of these days we'll all get together and bump elbows or something, I guess. Just want to mention that the reports from the three individuals that perform work under contracts with the Division of Drinking Water are in your board packet. You can see them in there. I think I mentioned in the last meeting that we had that since we've had a few changes on our staff, Terry Smith moving over to the compliance circuit rider position, Curtis Ludvigson is staying in place as the development specialist, and a new employee, Janelle Braithwaite, has taken over the management technician that we also perform. And I thought it would be a good idea today if Janelle would very quickly introduce herself and her background to you all so that you know who she is. And if she does that, then I'm going to say my report is over.
Okay, hello board. I'm excited to be with the Rural Water Association. I was previously the city recorder for Gunnison City, and I worked there for 10 years. So had a lot of experience with water projects, sewer projects, funding, and I'm excited to bring those abilities and to continue learning and work with rural water in the division. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
Any council questions for Janelle? Anything else, Dale?
No, Mr. Chair, I believe that, like I say, as always, if you all have questions regarding those reports, any of us are available to you at any time to explain things you may not understand or elaborate on the reports. So we'll be glad to do it. Just let us know.
Thank you. DWC update, Julie, are you there?
Actually, Roger, we've got an agenda item for the legislative audit report.
Oh, I missed it. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to
So we
hell.
should have Dave Gibson and Matt Harvey that have joined us, and I've asked them to come and give the portion of the legislative audit that they presented to the legislature last week. So thank you both for joining us.
There we go.
Thanks, Marie.
And Darren's here as well. Thank you for joining us, Darren.
You know, I was left off the agenda, so I feel like I don't have to do much. Is that how that works? So So thanks, board, for having us. We worked with DEQ, and Scott, or Marie's boss, is here, Scott. So we want to make sure in front of him that you all know how incredible she was to work with. It was one of our favorite divisions, and as you'll see as things unfold with some of the methods we used to do the audit and looking at the data, that this was one of the divisions that had the most complete record of data. So in our in-depth budget review, she introduced Dave Gibson, who was the supervisor, and Matt Harvey, who's also an audit supervisor in the office, who was really the principal on this chapter. I'm going to turn the time to Dave. He's going to take you through just a 5 or 6 minute presentation. And then if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer. So.
Can you see the presentation on your screen?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. All righty. Okay, the mission of the Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ, is to safeguard and improve Utah's air, land, and water through balanced regulation. DEQ carries out its mission through the combined efforts of its 5 divisions, which, as you know, includes the Division of Water Quality. In Chapter 1 of the report, we provide various funding information about the department and its divisions. We thought showing you information about the Division of Drinking Water's revenues that are generated from fees and permits from the entities that regulate would be of interest to you, and how the division compares to the other DEQ divisions. Highlighted is, as you can see, the Division of Drinking Waters, the fees and permits, the revenue that they've generated since 2015 to 2019. And the total percent increased from 15 to 19 is about 24%. The following table shows the amounts each of the divisions spent on services provided by the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office assists the divisions with permitting and enforcement actions. As you can see, the Division of Drinking Water has the lowest expenses for their services, but the division's total expenses increased 89% from year 2015 to 2019, which is the highest percent change. And also, if you notice, 2018 and 2019, there's quite a big jump. Evaluating DEQ's regulatory efficiency and effectiveness was a major theme of our review of the divisions. We use the following graphic throughout the report to help illustrate key data elements that we believe are essential to divisions' oversights and the entities that they regulate. We found that some programs did not either comprehensively collect certain elements of the framework or did not store them in such a way that data was usable. Fortunately, as Darren said, Division of Drinking Water, they had all the elements that we needed to help determine their compliance. That's on page 13 of the report. And if you see in the report, if it's dimmed out like this, that means it was missing that part of the data that we needed. Okay, Chapter 2, we discussed Division of Drinking Water. It is governed by the federal and state Safe Drinking Water Acts and is responsible for overseeing Utah's drinking water systems. As you know, there are 4 different sizes of water systems that the division regulates. We found that the larger systems tend to resolve violations more quickly than smaller systems, and very small systems serving 500 or fewer consumers are more likely to allow violations to go uncorrected longer. One reason for this is since they are smaller systems, they lack the expertise that larger systems have to help correct these violations. The median time, we found that the median time for water systems to correct significant deficiencies has been improving. The median time to compliance has gone from 1,020 days in 2005 to just over 74 days in 2019. Even so, we found some water systems are still slow to resolve significant deficiencies. We found that most of the deficiencies were corrected in less than 1 year, but 940 cases, or 29% took between 1 to 5 years, and 115 cases, or 4%, took 5 years or longer to correct. This keeps coming away. This is concerning since uncorrected significant deficiencies have the potential to lead to water contamination, public health problems. For example, contamination issues led to 12 reported deaths in Flint, Michigan from 2014 and 2015, and 69 reported deaths in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1993. We found that the Division of Drinking Water lacked enforcement action in the earlier years, and the trend toward enforcement has been increasing recently. In 2019, the division enforced on 56 significant deficiencies, while 321 significant deficiencies received no enforcement. We estimate that the division took enforcement action on 10% of the significant deficiencies since 2015. It should be noted that the division has never issued a fine for a violation. Exemptions are allowed by Utah Administrative Code. An exemption allows a water system to operate with a significant deficiency without enforcement from the division. We found that the division does not periodically review compliance exemptions it has granted to water systems. As you can see from this slide, exemptions are increasing, but oversight over past exemptions granted is not. The division has 1,099 deficiency exemptions on record since 1981. Without a mechanism for exemptions to be revisited, either through periodic review or through expiration, significant deficiencies posing public health hazards can persist indefinitely. We have 3 recommendations for the division. We recommend the division uses its enforcement authority to correct significantly non-compliant water systems. We also recommend that the division track and report the time it takes for entities to reach compliance. And finally, we recommend the division periodically review water system exceptions to determine if they are still warranted. This concludes my presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, board? Thank you.
Just, Mr. Chair, if I could just add real quick.
Yes.
I think for the board's benefit, I think what's important for us to point out is the overall direction of the division, with median time to corrections coming down, solving deficiencies improving, and the use of enforcement action being able to come from the division now, and a commitment to review all those exceptions. I think is the real takeaway, and we appreciated the work from the board. So wanted to add that.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's all the audit team has, Mr. Chair.
Pardon?
That's all that the audit team has.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me see. Julie Cobley on the fee update. Is Julie here?
Hi, everyone. I'm here. I'm just kind of, okay, here we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give an update on the division's strategic planning process, highlighting some of the work that we've done recently, exploring different fee options for the division. So just a reminder, from I think the last board meeting, the division has been working on developing a strategic plan since April. And out of that plan, we've identified 3 goals. Goal 1 is to strengthen public water systems through effective partnerships. Goal 2 is commitment to regulatory responsibilities. And goal 3 is commitment to excellence. Subcommittees were created to work on these specific goals to come up with action items for the different objectives. My group has been working on goal 2. So Under goal 2, objective 1 is to become sustainable and secure by diversifying balanced funding through developing a new fee structure. So we began working on this objective right away and researched and evaluated different fee options. We did that by reviewing some of the other states' fee structures. We did a lot of brainstorming internally in our subcommittee, and then we did some outreach with internal division staff for feedback. We put together a fee proposal which outlined our research and summarized the different fee options, which also included a strengths and weakness analysis of each option. And then we presented this fee proposal to the larger strategic planning committee and the executive staff for feedback and consideration. So we identified 2 different types of fees, base fees and service fees. Base fees are fees that are charged to water systems annually or some other type of interval. The fee could be a flat rate or could be scaled based on different parameters such as number of connections or population. And then service fees are fees that are paid by water systems for specific services that we provide, such as plan reviews or site visits, operating permits, or sanitary surveys. The different types of fee options under the base category that we came up with are flat fees, so where all systems pay the same fee, and then fees that are based on either system type or a system size classification, and then a charge per connection or a charge per usage. And the different types of service fee options that we came up with are SRF application fees, fees for plan reviews or operating permits, new public water system reviews, exceptions, source protection plan reviews, sanitary surveys, and that was actually quite a long list, and that's just a snapshot of those fees. So after reviewing our research and reviewing our strengths and analysis for each option, we concluded that the best fit for the division would be the base fee option based on some type of size classification. We saw that equitability was very important, so basing this on system size met this goal. But we also saw that it was important to have a revenue stream that is predictable and sustainable moving into the future. But then also really important to have a simple implementation so that eases the approach on the staff, and also the ability to be transparent and clear in our communication with public water systems. Where the service fee options did not meet all of these goals. And then in addition to those base fees, we saw that exception fees was a potential service fee that we could include now, and that was based on the findings that you just heard based on the legislative audit, which concluded that the division should be reviewing and renewing exceptions on an ongoing basis, and that historically we issue exceptions one time and there is no renewal process. So these fees for exception would help to build that internal capacity to handle that extra work involved in going back in time and reviewing exceptions, and then moving forward, reviewing them on an ongoing basis as part of a temporary exception process would go. So we have an exception fee proposal that's been added for consideration in the upcoming division's fee schedule. This is what it looks like. It's a 3-tiered approach for these fees, and it's based on level of complexity, which was derived at by going back and reviewing all of the exceptions that we have issued since 2018, and looking at the staff hours that resulted in those different types of reviews. So next steps, we understand that implementing some type of base fee for water system needs to be considered carefully, and that the outreach with public water systems and the public needs to be done on this to move forward with it over the upcoming year. And that's a wrap. Any questions?
Thank you, Julie. Do we have any further questions?
I don't have a question, Roger, but just a quick comment, just so the board knows. I've been supporting the strategic planning committee since it started, and I just want to commend Marie and the staff. Everybody's been putting in a ton of time. We have a 2-hour meeting slot every Friday, and the work is progressing really quite well. Recently the objectives of all the subcommittees have been defined, and I just want to relay to the board that there's a lot of great work going on.
Thank you, Scott. Director's report, Marie.
All right. I'm going to see if I can stir this up just a little bit with our response to the audit. So I want to thank Darren and his crew for taking the time to join us in this board meeting to update the board so that the board is aware of the audit findings that the division will take very seriously to address. And so, and I also want to thank Julie for coming and giving an update on our strategic planning. We recognized that there were some vulnerabilities within the division early on, and Darren and his group, Dave and Matt, were wonderful to work with through that audit and communicated with us all the way through that process. So I think they were with us for 4 to 6 months, collecting data, asking questions, doing interviews. And it was very clear to us along the process kind of where they were honing in and what they were finding. And so we weren't blindsided at all by this report. They communicated with us and asked questions. We knew where that was going. And that became part of the process of why we engaged in a strategic planning process even before they released the audit report as a whole. But I really want to draw the board's attention to several components that that were highlighted in that legislative audit. First of all, they highlighted the significantly low revenue stream from the division of drinking water has as compared to the other divisions within DEQ for dedicated credits. If you remember back onto that graph or that table that was shown, we are less than 10% of a couple of the divisions, and our nearest division was twice what we're pulling in dedicated credits. The division has been sorely underutilizing the ability to collect fees for the items that we are doing for its entire existence. And that needs to be rectified. And the board should be fully aware of the pushback that we are likely to get from the regulated community as we make the transition. If you remember, we are only 6 weeks into charging cost recovery fees for water systems that incur extra babysitting costs from us when they have a violation. So if there's a monitoring violation or a reporting violation, or if they have a significant deficiency that they failed to fix and they get a failure to fix violation, if we have to move forward and do enforcement orders, we are now recovering the cost from those water systems. And we have been trying to communicate to the board along the way. You heard about those fees this time last year that we were proposing those. And we reported to the board that those had been approved. And so we've been communicating with the board along the way with that. And And we're just now to the point where that revenue is going to start to come in. We chose that as the first step into dedicated credits and fees because that was a series of fees that the water systems could avoid should they choose to come into compliance or avoid getting violations. We have some water systems that will argue the fact that a missed sample was completely outside of their control because they forgot about it. And yet, if they have to pay a fee because we now need to spend more time and effort on their water system to process that violation, they're not likely to forget about it next time because it is within their control, and it is more within their control than it is within our control, whether they get those violations or not. And so, you know, I want to make sure that the board recognizes that the direction that we're going, and if you have any input or concerns or direction that you want to give the staff, because we're moving forward. We have instituted those fees, and Julie just presented to you that this year we have the next step of fees that we're going to institute. And that means that every time a water system asks for an exception from rule, they're going to have to pay for that. And there's going to be 3 tiers, and we will tell them which tier it's in. But if a water system does not want to put a fence around their spring, as opposed to us just exceptions for free, and not only just handing them out for free, historically, we would recommend it and give it to them even if they didn't request it. And that's how we ended up with nearly 1,100 exceptions on record, because that allowed us to avoid the confrontation of, I'm sorry, your fence is really expensive, but you either need to put it in or you need to be responsible for the ramifications of not having that in. So we're moving forward with that fee recommendation right now, and that will take a whole year, and we will continue to talk to the board as we go forward with this. But now a water system is going to have to decide whether it is in their best interest to pay for the exception or to pay for the actual repair or installation of whatever it is that they're considering an exception from. And starting this year, we are not granting exceptions that don't have a expiration date. Now, some of those expiration dates are 3 years out, some are 5 years out, but we are fully aware and trying to communicate to the water systems, when you get this exception, by the time it expires, if you want to renew it, you're going to have to pay a fee for that. So you now have 3 or 5 years to consider whether you want to just resolve this situation or you want to have the staff go through the time and effort to evaluate if your protections are equally protective of public health. So we have a lot of water systems that have those 1,100 exceptions, and we are going to have to go back and look at all of those and put those on a renewable schedule. We do not have the staff to do that. Right now, we have enough engineers to review the plan reviews that are coming in, issue operating permits for those, and to handle the new exceptions that are coming. We do not have enough people to go back and review 1,100 existing exceptions that are on record. We process about 100 exceptions a year, and we have the staff for that. So we need to figure out how we're going to get the capacity to address this budget or the legislative audit finding, and then how we can put things in place so that water systems have to seriously consider what is in their best interest and not just have a bunch of free loopholes that the division has allowed to be in place for them to continue on in their way. And part of that is going to be very, very uncomfortable for our water systems. It's not just going to be uncomfortable for our small water systems, it's going to be uncomfortable for our large water systems as well. And then hopefully you caught that Julie said the next step in our fees is that we need to just implement an annual fee on the water systems. We looked at a bunch of different audit options with our strategic planning group, And in the end, we need to have a reliable source of revenue that comes from dedicated credits. And these first two steps with the cost recovery fee and the exception requests are not sustainable because the water systems can choose to avoid those. So in the end, we are going to have to move towards an annual fee just for the pleasure of us regulating your water system. And that is not something that is new nationwide. It's not even something that's new within the state, but it is definitely something that is new to our regulated community. And I need the board to hear that and to recognize that and understand the direction that we're going. So I've got the legislative audit that we would do, but I want to just kind of open it up and ask the board to discuss this and to engage in this conversation so that I know that you have heard the direction that we're going and you heard those legislative audit findings.
Marie, this is Jeff. So on these proposed fees and actions, just to know the steps, this would require the legislature to approve the fees. This is not something that would be approved by the board, but by the state legislature. We don't have this authority. Would you be looking from the board to take a position on this, or just to be aware?
Both. I want the board to be aware of
I'm actually
it.
going to say just to be aware. We haven't had boards take positions on our fees in the past.
Okay,
but
good.
I do think, to Marie's point, we do want the board to be aware, as there will likely be questions, and that you need to know. We need that feedback, as Marie is suggesting, that if there's another suggested path forward, let's pursue that and talk about that now. But this is what we see as the anticipated approach moving forward.
Yeah, that's exactly accurate. We want you to be aware, and I'd like you to be engaged enough that when your constituents that reach out to you with concerns or questions, that you know why we're doing what we're doing, and that you know that you can come and either push those questions back to us or speak on that. Now, you know, I know you've all gone through the ethical training, and you need to be careful about speaking for the board, but I don't want you to be blindsided with this. You know, you've all experienced that water systems will reach out to you as board members with concerns, and I don't want this to be something that is news to you if that happens.
So Marie, if one concern is if you do receive approval from the legislature for some of these fees or for all of them, is there concern that the general funds might be reduced and it would just be a swap? That'd be putting a burden on the water systems without continued funding from the general funds.
The legislature can always do that. And we would try to talk through that and help them understand the need for the continued general funds. Right now, the general funds that we get are almost exclusively from the WIRA account that is authorized to the board for their matching amount to be able to handle the SRF program. So the vast majority of the money that we do get is from that account, and it is what creates the state SRF fund. And then there is a small amount of money, about $1.2 million of that WIRA account, that is not required for matching at this point because the federal government doesn't give us enough money. So we only have to do 20% of the match, and there's a little bit left over in the WIRA account, and that's the general fund that the division gets. So at this point, if they were to back off on that, that would mean going in and relooking at that structure, which I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to, but that is a long-standing conversation that we need, and Scott needs to have with DNR.
Yeah, and it's not our intent, Jeff, that this replace general funds. The intent is that this supplement the program right now. We would anticipate continuing with all of our federal funds and general funds that we're currently getting. But as noted, that's just not enough right now. And so we're looking to balance this program and to provide a little more stability ongoing. And to Marie's point, this is a long process. This is nothing that's coming forward this year. This is a year out that we're going to have these fees in a fee hearing and proposed. And I really appreciate Marie's efforts to start as soon as possible to get the word out. As she said, you all will have connections and can share feedback with us as we move forward and refine in this process. But we would anticipate all three of those uses, general fund, federal funds, and fees moving forward. It's just this division hasn't relied on those historically like the rest of our divisions have, and we need to balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, that's my question is, I guess I'd like a little bit of insight into why there is such a large discrepancy between the different divisions, and how did that become the way it is, and maybe some examples of fees or revenue sources in the other divisions that are similar to what is being talked about and proposed here, just to get a better idea of the big picture context of DEQ.
So we presented two fees. One, we are actually proposing this year to go before the legislature in the 2020 session. That is a fee to get an exception from rule. So when a water system asks for that, and we will require that they ask from now on, we aren't just going to offer those. When they ask for that and pay that fee, we will then evaluate it. If it is justified, we will grant that, and it will have a renewal date, and then they'll have to pay that fee again in 3 years. And so every 3 years, we will look at it and make sure that that exception from rule is still justified and still protecting public health. If they pay for our review and we decline to give them an exception, we will give them their money back. So they won't have to pay just for the review. They will only pay if that is granted. That's what we're asking for this year. Now, that's going to not be very much money based on 100 exceptions that we typically review. And that may even go down once they have to pay the cost on that. So that's not going to bring in a whole lot of money, but it will start to set the precedents to consider carefully those exceptions. Then if we can get the capacity within our engineering team to go back and look at those 1,100 old existing exceptions and have water systems really tell us whether they want to continue with that now that there is a fee, or if they would like to just resolve the situation and start to clean those up. But we at this point don't know how we're going to do that with the existing resources, because our engineering team is at full capacity with what we're doing on everything else. So
Marie, sorry, I may not have asked the question correctly or wasn't clear. You have done a wonderful job in explaining the fees that you are going to ask for. My question relates to the other divisions in DEQ. How have they accumulated 10 times the revenue that the Division of Drinking Water has over the years? And what does that look like?
Part of that, if I can, Marie, just a little bit, is the demand for services as well for our other divisions versus those in drinking water. And the structure initially in the federal funding that was coming in to the program for drinking water, that wasn't the case for some of our other programs. And as those other programs got new services that they were providing, fees came along with those. We just haven't had a lot of that in drinking water. There's been a lot of the status quo over the last several decades, and a lot of that is changing now, rightfully so, to get systems into compliance, as noted by the auditors. We have a very different operating model now than we've had in the past. And so that's why we're recognizing the need to move this going forward. But it's really just a context, the result of the context from how the program started in the amount of federal funding that came in from the beginning for this program that was there. And it just isn't sufficient anymore. Like all of our other programs, fund. And so now that we're seeing that need, we're needing those fees to help that program to grow.
Can you give
And
me
the other divisions, Eric, my understanding is that they've got a whole series of fees. So if you look at the list of fees that the other divisions have, it's 2 to 3 pages worth of a fee schedule that they have. And up until last year, we had 3 or 4 fees. We had the operator certification fee, we had the backflow technician fee, and little else. They charge for all of the permits, and there are fees just to be regulated by the Division of Water Quality or the Division of Air Quality. And so those fees that we are proposing are in alignment with both the division and what we have seen as we look out at other models.
So
one of the points that Marie has made in the past as well that I think is interesting, just to add some clarity, is drinking water is different than any of our other programs, where mostly we're limiting emissions or output from our other programs. And so there have been fees set up based on emissions or to try to limit those things. That's exactly the opposite in drinking water. We want drinking water. And so we haven't ever had the structure in place like we have on our other divisions where we've wanted to have a fee based on emissions. And so that's the difference in the paradigm as well for drinking water and why it's so unique and why we haven't had that historical fee-based model in this division, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can I ask a clarifying question then, I guess, to understand? Because of the federal funds that have historically been infused into the Division of Drinking Water, for a long time, that was sufficient to run the division, or it's never been sufficient, and now we're just, I guess, correcting a lack of funding that has gone back for decades.
It's your
and the lack of oversight. This is where I just have to give kudos to Marie in the direction that she's taking the program. When you see that information from the auditors, when you have systems that go decades in staying out of compliance, there's not any work required by the division to bring those systems back into compliance. That's just not acceptable. And Marie has taken the charge to get our systems back into compliance. And because we're doing that additional work to get them into compliance, it's not sufficient anymore. So that is a shift in how Marie and the program is being managed. And it's the right direction, absolutely, to get our systems into compliance. But that's part of that unique nuance as well, where it's not been sufficient.
Yeah,
well, and Eric, one of the other things I wanted to point out, the auditors showed a comparison of legal fees between all 5 of the divisions. You can see the Division of Drinking Water just hardly used legal fees at all. It's because we weren't actually legally enforcing anything for the history of our program. And so we do need to move forward with that and start using our enforcement authority to really encourage water systems, those water systems that don't respond to just being told this needs to be done and therefore they'll do it. That works for a good percentage of them, but not all of them. And so we have the other divisions spend anywhere from $300,000 up to $800,000 on legal fees. We were spending $30,000 on legal fees, and so we don't have that money, and we need to do that work, and we need to be comparable. We have estimated that we will need about $300,000 in legal fees to actually do what our responsibility is to enforce the Safe Drinking Water Act. And how are we going to get that money? Because the federal government isn't going to give it to us. The legislature clearly is not going to give us a new general appropriation. That is why we are starting to look at these dedicated credits.
Yeah, and understanding the difference in kind of how this has historically worked and working with a lot of these systems as an engineer, I 100% understand the pushback that will occur as these fees are rolled out. But it is also important to understand the operational similarities with the other divisions and getting all of the divisions onto this same playing field. And I think it's more important to understand the big picture of the entire DEQ and needing to balance all of the divisions as opposed to just focusing on how this is going to, and I'm going to use the term, negatively impact the water systems. I think it's much bigger than that, in my opinion, as it relates to even the state of Utah and how Department of Environmental Quality works and functions. So,
Eric, I think you're right, and I think the other thing that was touched on is that staff went out and did audit may not be the right word, but they looked at what are other states doing, right? How are other states funding their drinking water regulatory groups, and the fees that are being proposed are consistent with how other states are handling it. So, not only is there consistency across the DEQ divisions, but there's consistency across, other states in the nation as well.
What it means, though, is that the Division of Drinking Water is going to start to re-identify as being a regulator. We have for years been so focused on technical assistance that it's possible that we've forgotten what our core responsibility was, and that was to actually implement and enforce the Safe Drinking Water Act. And we've got some really great partners that can provide technical assistance, and technical assistance can still be a very valuable tool. It's just important in this new age of transparency and expectations and information that technical assistance is not the only tool that we know how to use and that we have available to us. And so for us to be able to address the audit findings, which again were that we need to use more of our enforcement authority. And we need to do it sooner rather than later so that we can get a lower return to compliance time on individual deficiencies. That's not based on just a water system as a whole, but an individual deficiency, and get that taken care of so that then we can move forward together as an industry. So yeah, I expect water systems are going to characterize it as detrimental to them, and it just hits their bottom line. I would hope that they would recognize that it is a renewed commitment from the division to follow up with them and to pay attention to what's going on and to be there through that process until things are actually resolved.
Maria, I have a question. This is Blake. Do you see a conflict of interest or the perception of a conflict of interest where people are basically paying for an exception so that, there could be the perception where we will provide more exceptions because that brings in more revenue, as opposed to we don't want exceptions, we want healthy systems. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I hadn't considered that. How I would answer that, though, is that if you notice, the rate of granting exceptions has dropped significantly under my leadership than it did under Kent's. We were pushing exceptions before. We were trying to get those out, trying to have as many of those in place as possible, because it made our lives a lot easier when we would go out and look at sanitary surveys and do inspections. If we could say, it's okay, you don't have to consider that, it made it easier. And I've dropped significantly how many of those exceptions are going out, because for me, an exception is that it's okay for you to live with a significant deficiency. An exception is only granted by me if you can demonstrate that there is sufficient public protection to equal the rule that was put in place. And we are requiring additional monitoring or additional acts that they have to take. So sometimes those exceptions now say you have to, you know, if you're not going to have a fence around your spring, you have to go up and inspect it every week. You can't just go up and look at it twice a year, or you have to take additional sampling to make sure that that's happening. So the exceptions that have gone out under my signature are harder to come by, and I decline a lot of them, and I send them back and I say, no, this isn't appropriate. So we have already tried to put that in place to redefine what an exception is. But there's a lot of old ones that are on the books that we just don't have the capacity to go back and look at. And I don't know if those old ones are providing adequate protection or if they've just been a free pass. And that's what the audit has found, is that we need to go back and do that, because I can't answer that question. I don't know. I haven't looked, nobody's looked at those 1,000 exceptions that are on the books. But our intent is to limit those exceptions. And by putting this fee in place, we are fully aware that water systems will probably drop how many they get. And we're not trying to sell them. The fee that we're going to rely on is the one that's going to be 1 or 2 years out, which is just an annual fee on the water systems. Because I don't want to start, I don't want to get in a mode where we have to try to get more of the items that we do have fees on. We just need those dedicated credits as part of our portfolio. It's not going to be fully fund the division. There's no desire to have that be our primary funding source, but it'd be good if it was 30% of our funding source. 25 to 30% is what we're shooting for. We're not going to get that with the exceptions. This is, again, just kind of a baby step to help the water systems start to understand. But we are on track to just have to start charging water systems to be a water system.
Is there, Julie mentioned a strategic rollout. Do you have a period of time or a schedule that we could anticipate having discussions with fellow water companies and then being able to provide input back to you?
So the exception fees, those are a short time frame. Those will be proposed for public comment as early as September, and then there'll be a fee hearing. So those exception fees it's a matter of weeks. The concept of an annual fee, Julie didn't propose it because we haven't worked all of that out yet, and we want to spend some time with stakeholders to work out those details. Whether that is next year at the earliest, or 3 or 4 years out, if we need some time to transition, that will kind of depend on whether the legislature can give us a stopgap on funding for the interim. So if the legislature can't help us out with funding in the interim, we'll have to move to that a lot quicker. The funding that we were granted last year would have given us up to 5 years to make this transition. That was rescinded because of COVID. I am not confident if the situation has changed enough for the legislature to feel like there's some money for us to get, we will continue to have those conversations. If we can get a building block, that would give us some breathing space to bring the water systems along a little bit slower. Otherwise, we're going to have to move more quickly towards it.
It's a difficult position to be in where the number of small systems and the amount of technical assistance and also probably deficiencies apply to the smaller systems. And they're probably the least able to fund proportionate to the time and effort. You're between a rock and a hard place there.
Yeah, and we are between a rock and a hard place when it comes to technical assistance and probably oversight and deficiencies. Our small systems proportionally have more of those. But then again, we also receive 10 times as many data points from the large system as we do the small systems. And we do significantly more on those. When a water system is in their very first chlorinator, that doesn't take as much staff resources as when a water system builds a brand new water treatment facility. And so there are different resources that we provide the large systems versus the small systems. But some of the large systems take more in one or another type of resource from us as well. But you're absolutely right. The ability to pay becomes an issue, and the board sees that more than anything else. You tend to see the water systems that need help. And so, when we have a water system that comes and we give full principal forgiveness, can they handle an annual fee? They're going to have to some level. What that level is, we want to be able to work through that and get stakeholder buy-in on what that's going to look like. What's appropriate and what will seem fair to the industry as a whole.
Just to give you my opinion, Utah has been seen as not a big regulator in the water. Nationally, it's not known to be a hard regulator and providing technical assistance. I would hate to see that pendulum swing too much. I don't think that's being proposed. I'm not hearing that. I'm just hearing that it needs to be tweaked because I think there's more gained by people understanding. I mean, I think everyone wants to do well, and I think the other fact is when one utility gets a black eye, it kind of hurts all of us. It's for the public health of everybody, and so it puts into question. So it's raising the tide as well as the individual things going on.
The other thing we need to figure out is how to really measure the return to compliance time on individual deficiencies. And so we need to develop that performance measure and figure out a way to track that and really be able to report that. We hope to have some traction on that soon. And we'll share that with the board. We'll be asked to share that with the legislature. And so, we genuinely want to be authentic on the data that we're presenting. And we are really open and want to hear what is the best way to go forward with this. And we really would like the input of the board. And so, Dave, I appreciate that comment because it it is important that we aren't a pendulum and we swing from all the way on one side all the way over to just being strictly focused on enforcement and not really understanding the realities of what a water system is dealing with, both the large water systems and the small water systems. We just need to find some balance there. So that's kind of what our response is, and we actually really agree with the legislative audit, and they did a fair assessment. What they found is accurate, and we're going to try to be responsive to that and resolve some of those situations.
Hey,
Hello, somebody.
hello, somebody.
Somebody's been doing some online shopping.
Somebody got new slippers.
So we will move on. The other item I had, it's in your report, that the enforcement report. You can see the water systems that we have been working on enforcement with. All of the water systems that are listed under corrective action have entered into a legal binding enforcement agreement with us. And then you can see the water systems that are currently not approved. And we are working with them as well. What we haven't done historically is actually enforce on these orders that are in place, and we are starting to move forward with that. So these water systems that are under an enforcement order with us, if they're not meeting their deadlines, we intend to start moving forward with enforcement on that. If that gets their attention and they resolve those problems, we can always back away from that. But if this is the only way that we can move them forward to compliance, we will start using that now. So if anybody has questions on that report or any individual system, you're welcome to ask that now or follow up with me later. Okay, so right here at the end, and I assume Mark has been on here listening to this entire meeting, just for an introduction right at the end, but we've hired a new employee. Many of you know Rachel Cassidy has worked with our division for 25 years, and she recently took a position still within the state, with the state's DTS program. And so Mark Berger is filling her position as rural manager. Mark comes to us from the Division of Air Quality. And Mark, if you would be willing to just take a minute and introduce yourself a little bit to the board, that would be great. And thank you for sticking around for almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get an incentive award or something for it, but no, just kidding. Thanks, Marie. Mark Berger. It's my second day on the job. I'm really excited to introduce myself to you. I worked at the Division of Air Quality for just over 10 years. The last 7 years of that was in the planning branch, doing rule writing and long-term air quality planning. We also created and administered several incentive programs. You may have heard like the Volkswagen mitigation plan, or I don't know if any of you may have heard of, we did like a lawnmower and snowblower discount exchange program, things like that. And I really loved the job. But when I started looking into this, I got really excited about some of the new things that were happening in the leadership here. And I got real excited to apply and get a new situation, a new opportunity. In my previous life in the air quality world, I worked directly often with the Air Quality Board. So I'm looking forward to opportunities to work with you all as well.
Thank you, Mark. We are very grateful that we were able to convince Mark to come work with us, and we're excited to utilize his skills and abilities. So it's great to have you with us. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mary.
Just to let the board know, those of you who remember Ying Ying and work with her, she has retired. She retired on August 1st. And so with her retirement, Nathan Lundstedt has been promoted into that position as assistant director. And with Nathan's promotion into assistant director, we have also promoted Michael Newberry, an engineer within our permitting section, to be the permitting manager, which was the position that Nathan used to have. So those are the changes that we've had within the staff. We do have several recruitments open right now. We've got a position for a fiscal analyst open to provide some extra support within our budgeting and finance team. We have 2 positions open in our permitting section, and we are currently recruiting for a level 4 engineer to be our treatment expert, as well as manage the surface water treatment role. So those are our recruitments that are currently open. So hopefully by our next board meeting, I will have more employees to introduce to you.
Anything else, Marie?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Public comment. Do we have any public here that would like to comment? I don't hear any. Board discussion, open board discussion. Do you have any questions or comments, board? How about other? Next board meeting is November 3rd, 2020. Place to be determined. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. How does the board feel about our next meeting? How do you want to do it? You want to have these electronic meetings, or do you want to have a real face-to-face meeting and then have the public be able to address us electronically? Any opinions on that?
Roger, this is Jeff. Just from my own personal perspective, until I get past COVID and we have vaccinations, I'd rather not leave my facility just because it's difficult to find the extra time.
Okay. Anyone else?
This is Barbara. This is Barbara. I agree. I feel like these meetings are just as effective as meeting in person. Until unless something major happens with COVID between now and November 3rd, I don't see a reason to meet in person.
When COVID mellows out, should we go back to the regular type of meetings? Or do you want to continue this kind of non-personal meeting?
As a suggestion, I think we are getting accustomed to this format for meeting, but it might be good to come back together and do a face-to-face one that's safe and appropriate, just for comparison again, to see if we prefer that. Although I do like the option of allowing presenters, water system presenters, to Zoom in or come in remotely, save them the travel. So like that still would make a lot of sense if they opt for that.
The other thing, Roger, I'm not sure if we have bylaws on that or rules that dictate when we can meet electronically. I know we can do it now because we're in an emergency declaration or emergency situation. I'm not sure if once we're past that, we're allowed to have these electronic meetings once we're past that. Maybe we can, I don't know. I guess that'd be one question.
So should we let it ride right now and see what happens in November? And perhaps November's will be at least like this or similar to it, unless we go.
Roger?
Yeah,
Can I speak to Jeff's question about electronic meetings?
yes.
So the executive order to hold electronic meetings temporarily was rescinded, and it was made into law as part of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So we can hold electronic meetings if we do a written determination, like Roger read at the beginning, for each meeting that we have electronically. And I believe one of the requirements is that you have to have a reason why you're holding it electronically. So we have to keep that in mind.
Sounds good.
This
Thank
is
you.
Eric. This is Eric. I'll chime in. I prefer face-to-face interaction. That's just me and my personality. So when it is appropriate and safe, I would prefer to be together in the same space.
That is my personal feeling also. Comment? So we'll see, we'll do something on November 3rd. We'll see how it works out. And we have one more motion that I think we need to talk about. It's called adjourning. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Dave.
Dave, make a motion.
Blake seconded.
Blake seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to adjourning? No. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.